Staying in the north, the Germans are going to go all the way to the northern edge of the battlefield here and activate the 326th Volksgrenadier. Their trains are on map, as you can see, and they have a complete MSR heading off the north edge. We are not going to place them into a prepared defense, at least not as of yet. So that brings us to their snafu roll. You can see they have a fatigue 0. They are not mixed or coordinated. They get a +1 for the game specific. Their trains are at optimal distance for +2. They are not ghosted or crossing the streams, but they are using tracks. So that's going to be a -1 for a net +1 to the snafu for the 326th. And that 8 becomes a 9. That is a full activation. And now to decide whether or not to place objective markers. And I think they are going to place some objective markers. We're going to place both of them here on top of this third of the 395th from the 99th Infantry Division. And we have 2 organic artillery points and no attached. So that's going to give us a total of 2 for the activation. And let's see, how do we want to work this? I think we're going to go ahead and bring these guys up. 1, 2. And we're going to make an attack here at, I think this is Hofen. The first of the 753rd will make the attack, assisted by first of the 751st. We will spend 1 artillery point in a suppression barrage. So it's going to be action rating 2, gives us a +2. They have no support. They are in a double objective zone for 3, 4, 5 for the artillery barrage, and 6 for the assist. The defenders have an action rating of 3. The 99th does have support, which makes it a 4. They are in prepared defense. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think they may be just out of command radius. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. Nope, they're in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep, they are just within command radius. So that will be another +1 for the prepared defense, brings it to 5. And then they are in terrain, which makes it a 6. So a 6. -6 is no modifier on the combat table. The roll is not going to be good enough. That is an 8. That is an A1 desituational and traffic. Since they are in prepared defense, that means the Americans will also suffer a step loss. So an exchange here, 1 step loss each. And we will finish up the rest of the activation here for the 326th. There's not much more that's going on. We are going to get this ersatz battalion basically out of the 277th way. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll just bring them back here to the headquarters unit. And I don't see that there's much else for us to do. So no isolation effects to impose, and we're rolling for fatigue. With the attack, it's a 3 or less. That is a 5, so they retain fatigue level 0. As we clean up from that activation, I think, there's not much of an opportunity for them to do much more. I think we're going to need, can they actually force them out? They're going to need a real good dice roll to do that. I think we're just going to be content to let 326th have a single activation this turn. And that will end 326th, and with that, it'll pass back to the Americans. For the Americans, they have just 3 formations remaining to be activated this turn. One of those is Combat Command B of the 9th Armored Division, which is encircled in the pocket at Saint-Vite. I think we'll save that one for last, which leaves the other two formations as the 9th Infantry Division, which you can see arriving here as reinforcements this turn, as well as 2 regiments of the 1st Infantry Division also arriving as reinforcements. So I think we're going to go ahead and activate the 2 arriving formations first. And of those, we'll start with the 1st Infantry Division. 1st Infantry Division enters at entry hex either O or P. And you can see there are 2 entry hex Ps here. Now, 9th Infantry Division is scheduled to enter at entry hex P. So what I've decided to do to keep these 2 formations from mixing and coordinating one another, we're going to bring 9th Infantry Division in at the eastern entry hex for entry hex P, and we'll bring in part of the 1st Infantry Division here along the highway for entry hex P. We don't get the entire 1st Infantry Division this turn. We get 6 of the line battalions, basically 2 regiments, about 2/3 of the division. You can see they also enter with 2 battalions of support. One is a half-strength tank battalion, the 745th Tank Battalion, which has 3 of its 6 steps. They also get the 634th Self-Propelled Tank Destroyer Battalion, which has 2 of its 3 steps. Now, we will go ahead and flip over the headquarters here to activate the formation, and the trains would appear here in Hex P with the headquarters. I've just kind of moved everything back a little bit so you can see the entry hexes involved and talk a little bit about how they're going to enter. There are also 2 more entry hexes for entry hex O just to the west, just off screen here. At the beginning of the turn when we were placing reinforcements, I didn't want to spread the 1st Division too thinly, and we want to try and bring them in as close to the action as we can. We didn't want to leave necessarily a big gap here. So that's why we're bringing the reinforcements in where we are this turn. You can see also that 1st Infantry Division arrives with a fatigue level of 1 already, and they have 1 attached artillery point. Now, the trains are on the map, as you can see here in the entry hex, and we have a complete MSR. We are not going to put 1st Infantry into a prepared defense right now. In fact, they are going to be attacking, hopefully, through Vonderheit here and to the south to try to come to grips with 1st SS Panzer Division, which is broken through and reached all the way out to Malmedy. So let's get right to the snafu roll and see whether or not 1st Infantry Division is going to be able to do anything, because these first 2 days, even reinforcing units that are not cut off or surrounded can have a difficult time activating, as we've seen with the 2nd Infantry Division, which has failed to activate on either the 16th or the 17th this game. With 1st Infantry Division, they are going to have a -1 for their fatigue level. They are neither coordinated nor mixed, and then they have an additional -2 for the game specific. So that's a -3 right off the bat. The trains are at optimal distance though, which will give them a +1 to bring it up to -2. They're not ghosted and they're not crossing any streams. Neither are they using any tracks. So we've got a -2 to the snafu roll, which means there's a good chance they get to do something, but it's going to require a 9 or better on the dice in order to get a full activation, which is really what we need at this point, because they've got to get south and get into the fight as quickly as they can. So a -2 on the snafu, and they're going to just miss it with an 8. That's going to become a 6, which is a partial. That gives them 1 objective marker, and it will have their artillery. You can see they have 4 organic artillery points plus 1 attached. There's a total of 5. Because that's halved and then rounded down, that's really only going to give them 2 artillery points, which may be enough for what they're going to be able to do this turn. And the real killer is the half movement. It's going to slow their progress advancing. Because of that, I think we're going to have to start with the 2nd Battalion of the 18th Infantry Regiment, advancing here for 1.5, and it'll be accompanied by the 1st of the 18th. And actually, let me go ahead and place our objective marker before we get much further. I'll place the objective marker there. And the 1st of the 18th will make an attack on the 1st Company of von der Heydt's little Kampf group. The division will spend 1 artillery point to for a suppression barrage. And for the attack then, we have an action rating of 4. They do have red support, so that's going to make it a 5. No double objective zone. 6-7 for the artillery. 8 for the assist. The defenders have an action rating of 2. They have no support. Neither are they dual. They are not in a prepared defense, but they are in terrain, as you can see here. So that's going to make that a 3. So we have an 8 minus 3 is going to give us a +5 on the combat table. And it's a good roll. That 10 becomes a 15. That's going to be a 2-step loss retreat and an automatic, a 2-step loss for the defenders and an automatic retreat. However, as you can see here, both von der Heydt's units only have 2 steps. So that's just going to go ahead and outright eliminate the 1st unit of von der Heydt. And as you can see, they both have the yellow circled action rating, which means they are non-rebuildable. So a good first showing for 1st Infantry Division, even if they are a bit slow in moving. Now we'll bring up 1, 2, bring up the 3rd Battalion there. And for the rest of the division, the other regiment, we will 1, 2, actually, do we want to, no, we'll leave them here for now. We'll just leave them like so. Maybe we will allow him to get a little forward there. And that is, unfortunately, all that the 1st Infantry Division can do in this activation. So now there's no isolation effects to apply, and we will roll for fatigue. Making the attack means a 3 or less, and they will increase their fatigue level. And they roll a 5, so no fatigue gained in that turn, which is good. Now we need to figure out if they're going to be able to get a 2nd activation. You can see they need a 4, 5, or 6 to do so. And unfortunately, they just missed it with the 3. So only a single partial activation for 1st Infantry Division here on the 17th of December, which is a little disappointing for the Americans, seeing as things are getting critical along the northern shoulder here. They're going to need to start to hustle it up. So with that done, we are now back to the Germans. We're going to slide a little further to the east now for the Germans' next activation, and we're going to be activating the 277th Volksgrenadier, again, just along the northern edge of the battlefield here. You can see the combat trains are on the map back here with a complete MSR. We are not going to be placing 277th into a prepared defense, so we will move on to the snafu roll. You can see they have a fatigue level of 0 at this point, so no modifier for that. They're not coordinated nor mixed. They do get a +1 for the game-specific DRM, and they will get another +1 for being at optimal distance, bringing it up to a +2. However, the trains are in ghost mode, so that's going to lower it to a +1, and then there are no crossing of the streams and no tracks being used. So a +1 to the snafu roll for 277, and a roll of 7 will become an 8, which is a full activation. That's going to give them 2 objective markers, and they're going to place those objective markers right here, right in the middle of this large concentration of mostly 2nd Infantry Division units. I think there's still one, maybe two 99th Infantry battalions up here. And they have 3 organic artillery points with no assigned artillery, which will give them a total of 3 for the activation. And now we've got to figure out what we're going to do. We're going to, again, continue to kind of slide them to the right to clear a little more space for 12th SS Panzer, which is yet to go, and see if they can't get in and start attacking some of the American units up here in the north. And I think we're going to have this guy move across here for 3. We're going to bring the 2nd Battalion up to 4. And we're going to launch our first attack here on 2nd of the 293rd Infantry. We're going to use the 1st Battalion of the 989th. It's going to be assisted by the 2nd Battalion here. And we are going to spend 1 artillery point for a suppression barrage. That's going to give us an action rating 2. They do have red support, as you can see. That makes it a 3. They're in a double objective zone as 4, 5, 6 for the suppression barrage, 7 for the assist. Defending, they have an action rating of 3. The 99th Infantry Division, I believe, does have, yes, it does have support, which becomes a 4. They are also in prepared defense, which is a 5, and they are in terrain for a 6. So a 7 minus 6 is only a +1 on the combat table. And it was almost a good roll. A 6 plus 1 becomes a 7. That's going to be an attacker step loss and a situational retreat for the defenders with traffic, although we won't actually place any traffic because the attackers do not actually enter the hex. Essentially, it is an exchange, 1 step loss for each unit. I'm going to go ahead and record those, and then we'll continue with the rest of the activation shortly. Having recorded those losses, we're going to continue on here, and we'll slide the Fusilier Company to 4. This battalion will move up here for 2, across the stream here for 3, 4, and we'll bring him to 4 to here. Now on the northern side, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll bring up this battalion in the rear, 1.5, 2. And we'll slide the Pioneers into the headquarters hex as the divisional reserve. We are going to have the 2nd Battalion of the 991st spot for a 1-point artillery barrage on this hex here where 2nd of the 9th Infantry is located. There are 2 American battalions, the 2nd and 3rd Battalions of the 9th Infantry Regiment in this hex. And that means that the 1 artillery point is going to attack each of the units. I'm going to roll 2 dice. The red die will be the top unit. The white die will be the bottom unit. Since they are in terrain, it means a 4, 5, or 6 to score a hit. And as you can see there, the top unit, 2nd of the 9th, will suffer 1 step loss. We're going to repeat that with our last artillery point with the 1st Battalion of the 991st spotting here on the 1st of the 38th hex with the 2nd Battalion below it. And again, it's going to be the same thing. Red die will be the top unit, white die the bottom. And again, the top unit, in this case the 1st of the 38th, is going to suffer a 1-step loss. Looking around, I don't see anything else except we are going to bring the combat trains out of their ghost mode. They did not move this activation, and they're within optimal distance of the headquarters, which will allow us to flip them back over to their normal side. And I think with that, we are ready to clean it up, which means now we are going to roll fatigue. We did make 1 attack here, so a 3 or less, and they will increase their fatigue. Roll of 5 means no fatigue increase. And even though they need a 6 to get a second activation, we're going to go for it and see if we can get that. And just short with another 5. So that's going to wrap it up for the 277th activation. Nothing super spectacular. They were able to inflict 3 step losses on the Americans in exchange for a single step loss to themselves. And you can see they're starting to push a little bit further to the west here, threatening perhaps to encircle this rather large grouping of American units here. So we'll see how the Americans respond to that in the coming turn. But with that, we're going to go back over to the Americans, and I think we're going to go ahead and activate the 9th Infantry next. Now we're sliding again slightly further to the west. We're actually in between the 1st Infantry Division, which we saw activate, and the 277th. You can see the kind of the western edge of that grouping of American troops that the 277th is moving in on right there. 9th Infantry Division is right in between the two of them. We're going to flip over the headquarters and activate it. The trains are on map in the entry hex, and we have a complete MSR. Again, just like the 1st Infantry Division, we are not going to place them into a prepared defense. I'm going to leave these guys unstacked here for a minute. Which means we're on to the snafu roll. So with the snafu roll, the 9th Infantry Division, like the 1st Infantry Division, arrives with a fatigue level of 1. They do have multiple battalions in support. They have a self-propelled tank destroyer battalion as well as a regular tank battalion. So they have red support, which will come in handy when they are making some attacks. And I believe these both start, like the 1st Infantry Division, slightly under strength. For the snafu roll, we're going to have a -1 for their fatigue level. They are not coordinated or mixed. We're going to get another -2 again for that game-specific DRM for a total of -3. Optimal distance makes it a -2. They are not ghosted, but they are crossing the streams because, if you recall from the second, from 1st SS Panzer Division's activation, they overran the 2nd Infantry Division's headquarters. 2nd Infantry Division, when they activated, had to relocate their trains to the only MSR available to them, which is here. So 2nd Infantry Division and 9th are both crossing the streams now. So that's going to be an additional -1, takes it back down to -3. And also you can see they are using tracks in this hex, which makes it a -4 for the snafu roll for 9th Infantry Division. This means a 7 or better on the dice in order to get even a partial activation. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, and it's, as I kind of suspected, that 5 -4 is a 1, and that's a failure. Now the question is, do we turn it into a failure flip, which would allow us basically to reduce our fatigue level by 1, which will help in future snafu rolls, or do we try to press on and get a second activation? We would need a 4, 5, or 6, and we would be, again, looking at a -4 on the snafu roll. As much as I would like to get 9th Infantry Division really on the map and heading into position, I think it would be better off if we went ahead and did the failure flip in this case, because the -4 is such a heavy snafu penalty, as we've seen. And what this is going to do is that alone will turn it into a -3, because we'll not have the fatigue level modifier anymore. But also next turn, that game-specific die roll modifier for the Americans is going to decrease to a -1. So by doing this, we should set 9th Infantry up for a -2 snafu modifier next turn. It's still, like I said, yet another disappointing activation for the Americans, especially here in the north. Things have gone generally, I would say, kind of poorly for them thus far up here. Some of that may have been player induced, but they certainly haven't been helped by some of their snafu rolls thus far, and it's leading to a bit of a difficult situation, which they're going to need to try to rectify here over the next couple of days. So that's it, a short, sweet, and essentially non-existent activation for 9th Infantry Division, and we'll kick it back to the Germans now. Well, the last German formation to activate in the north is going to be 12th SS Panzer Division here. The headquarters is located back here a ways, and the trains are off the map to the east, right on the east edge of the map in Nettersheim. So we are not going to place them in a prepared defense, which means we're ready to take a look at their snafu roll. You can see here they are still fresh, which will give them a +1. They are not coordinated nor mixed. They get another +1 for the game specific for a total of +2. The trains are just at optimal distance for +3. They are not ghosted nor crossing any streams, and they're not using tracks. So we have a +3 to the snafu die roll for 12th SS. And the 8 that they rolled will become an 11. That is plenty to give them a full activation. The headquarters has 4 organic artillery points, and they have a total of 3 assigned, which will give them 7 artillery points, which I think is the most we've seen yet out of any formation. So 7 artillery points and 2 objective markers. The 12th SS has been moving into position here, and they are going to be driving basically due west here. They would like to be able to sort of break through the 99th's lines, overrun the headquarters here, as well as capturing the twin villages, which you can see is also a German victory point hex. And if they can do that, that will really sort of dislodge this whole defensive perimeter here on this northern shoulder, and it could end up pushing the Americans back well to the west. So we'll see what happens here. It's well within the capabilities of 12th SS to accomplish that. But to start that off, they're going to place both of their objective markers right here. And by doing so, that's going to place both of the battalions here on the east in the objective zone, but also the battalion here won't quite reach this battalion where the support is dropped, however, but we won't worry about that right now. First thing we need to do is break into the defensive position. And I think we're going to start that off by bringing up the one of their Panzer battalions. He's going to go 1, 2, 3.5, and when he gets to here for 3.5, he's going to enter the AV zone of control exerted by this 1st Battalion of the 393rd and the support that they have from the 801st Tank Destroyer Battalion. And the Germans will do a stopping engagement, even though it's not required, because they don't want to end up here. They want to continue moving. So the stopping engagement is a 5 AV value plus a 4 action rating for a total of 9, plus 1 for being a double objective zone gives them a 10. The defenders have an action rating of 3 and an AV of 3 for a total of 6. So it's a plus 4 on the engagement table with the targeted support line. And the roll is a 7. Plus 4 is an 11, which is just what is needed to inflict a target loss and drop. So what that means is that's going to kill the single remaining step of the 801st Tank Destroyer Battalion, which means the 99th Infantry Division, now none of the divisions or none of the battalions within the formation have any support left. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that off, and then we will continue with the 12th SS. Having recorded that now, that will remove the support from the entire formation. I'm not going to mark all of the units as support dropped. I've moved the support dropped marker that was on the battalion here to the headquarters just to serve as a reminder that the division no longer has any support in its upcoming attacks. The Panzers were going to continue with their last half movement point into this hex and drop the support of the other battalion if necessary, but that's no longer necessary. So instead, I think they will stay right here and they will use an attack by fire on 1st of the 393rd. They are in terrain. They're also in a prepared defense, which means they're going to need a 5 or 6 to score a hit. And a 3 will be a miss. That's going to stop the, or bring the Panzer Battalion to a stop because it has used its 2 fire events now. And we will continue on and see what we want to do next. I think let's see. We're going to end up attacking both of these battalions in this activation, and I'm just trying to figure out whether it would be better to attack this one or that one first. So ultimately, keeping in mind that we'd like to drive out here and overrun the formation headquarters, that's going to require placement of another objective marker because this is outside of that objective zone currently. We do have a recon unit which is capable of placing that objective marker, so we'd like to save this guy until after we have essentially poked a hole that he can drive through and attack the village there. Now, overrunning the headquarters will cause the prepared defense to be removed as well, which is going to make it easier to attack any battalions subsequent to jumping the headquarters unit. Again, assuming we get that far, the dice are going to have a lot to say about that. With that in mind, I think what we are going to do is 1, 2. Let's go ahead and bring up the he's a 3. Here we go. Here's a 4. Just looking for the battalions that are going to give us the best chance of actually breaking through. The formation is doesn't have necessarily as high action ratings as maybe you would come to expect from an SS Panzer Division. The Recon unit is a 5. The 2 Panzer battalions are 4s, as are the Jagdpanzer battalion. But they only have, it looks like they've got 1 truck-mounted battalion that is a 4 on its deployed side, and then they have their Panzer Grenadiers in the half-tracks. That battalion is a 4 on its move side as well as its deployed side. Is it going to matter? I think it does matter because every little plus you can get on the combat table is key. So let me go ahead and think about this for a few minutes and we'll pick back up in just a second. Having looked things over, I think we're going to start by moving 1st to the 25th up here for 1. We're going to have the Pioneers flip over. They're going to move here for a half, 1.5, 2.5. And now we will have 1st to the 25th attack the objective hex assisted by the Pioneers, and we will expend 1 artillery point as a suppression barrage. We have an action rating of 4. They have red support for 5. They're in a double objective zone for 6, 7, 8 with the suppression, 9 for the assist. The American defenders have an action rating of 3. They do not have any support. They are in prepared defense for 4, and they are in terrain for 5. So a 9 minus 5 is a +4 on the combat table. So in order to be successful and dislodge the defenders, the Germans are going to have to roll a 7 or better on the dice. And that is exactly what they do. That 7 becomes an 11. It's going to be 1 step loss to the defenders and an automatic retreat. So what that's going to do, since they are 3 or more hexes away from the headquarters refuge, they will flip to their unprepared side and they will retreat to either the headquarters hex or an adjacent hex. Now, right now, in the headquarters hex is a lone engineer battalion, and seeing what is about to happen potentially, I'm considering retreating them to the headquarters hex there, which will give us 2 units in the hex. That will provide an additional +1 to the defense. The other possibility is placing them here just east of the village, and what this will do is require the Germans to make another attack prior to even getting a chance to attack the village. So is it better to allow the Germans to be able to drive right up and make an attack on the village but have an additional +1 there, or do we want to force them to kind of stop and make a couple of attacks along the way? This is one of those decisions where I don't think there's necessarily a single right answer. So let's go ahead and let's make things potentially a little more difficult for the Germans. We're going to retreat them to this hex here, and then 1st of the 25th will occupy that hex there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to record the step loss here for 3rd of the 393rd, and then we'll continue. Having recorded the losses, we can now continue. All right, phase 1 of the 12th SS attack plan has been accomplished. They have achieved an opening in the line. Now you can see that in order to attack not only the twin villages here where the headquarters is, but also the battalion that was just retreated, we're going to need another objective marker placed to create another objective zone. And that's one of the things I don't know if new players have yet appreciated, but with the series, objective zones extend out 2 hexes from where the objective marker is placed. Situational retreats require units to retreat 3 hexes. Automatic retreats will require them to retreat also essentially 3 hexes, since they need to be at least 3 hexes from the headquarters refuge. But what that does is that will place the unit outside of any objective zone, or rather the objective zone that many times was used to attack them. And so when you talk about setting up a defense in depth in BCS, you're generally going to want your units to be 3 hexes behind one, or your second line to be 3 hexes behind your first line, because that's going to cause some difficulties for the attacker, in that he's going to have to either split up both of his objective markers, thus making each individual attack that's much more difficult, or he's going to have to somehow come up with a way to create additional objective zones beyond the objective zone he uses to penetrate your first line of defense. All that said, let's continue here. The Germans are going to use now their Recon unit here. He's going to come up for a half, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. Now, he does not have to stop in this hex from the ZOC by the infantry battalion here, because he has a TAC movement factor. So the only thing that's going to stop a TAC mover is an AV zone of control, which is exerted by either a real AV unit or support. And since the German panzers killed the last of the support for the AV support for the 99th, that basically means that any TAC moving enemy units will be able to drive right past the 99th for now, until they can reestablish some AV support. Having moved here, the Recon Kampf Group needs now to place, or attempt to place, an objective marker, because they can't do any attack by fires or shock attacks or normal combats outside of the an objective zone. They do have the possibility they could make an attack here on 2nd to the 395th, but that's not what we're interested in right now. We're interested in driving due west with our main objective for the division today of the Twin Villages. So with that in mind, we're going to use our first fire event to attempt to place an objective marker. I need to roll the action rating or less of the unit. In this case, it is a 5. So anything but a 6, and we'll place an objective marker. A 3 is good enough, and we can place the objective marker anywhere within 2 hexes of the recon unit. So with that in mind, to maximize the coverage of our objective zones for this activation, we're going to place it directly on the villages right here. And you'll see this will extend out 2 hexes from the village, which is going to include the 3rd and 394th here, as well as the 2 units down here by the main highway. And that's not that we're necessarily going to be attacking these units this activation. If we are, then things have gone extraordinarily well for 12th SS. But it's just nice to have the ability to do so if the opportunity arises. Now that has expended his first fire event, and at this point he's got 1 more fire event left, and we can choose to do one of 2 things with that. We can either do an attack by fire on either of these 2 units that are adjacent to him, or we can use it to do a shock attack on the 3rd of the 393rd. And a shock attack is essentially the BCS's version of an overrun attack. It requires attack mover and allows you to attack something in your or during your movement, but it does consume a fire event. And I think, you know what, I don't think we've seen a shock attack yet in the game, so for that reason, why not? Let's go ahead and conduct a shock attack on the unprepared 3rd Battalion here. Now, the way this is going to work is it will consume, as I said, the 2nd fire event for the Germans. They can spend up to 1 artillery point, and they're going to do so in a suppression barrage. And we have an action rating of 5. The hex has to cost 3 movement points or less to enter, and you can see it is it's a clear hex that also has track running through it, and you can use the roads to reduce the movement cost of the hex. You don't have to pay the movement cost to enter it, you just have to be able to enter the hex. So we've got an action rating of 5. It is a dual unit, as you can see here, making it 6. It is not in a double objective zone. We will get only +1 for the suppression of the artillery because you only get the +2 in a regular attack. A shock attack's suppression is only worth +1, which is another reason why shock attacks can be a little less effective than a regular combat. That's going to bring us to a 7, and we have no assisting unit available. So we have a 7 on the attacker's side, not all that great. On the defender's side, they have an action rating of 2. They have no support. They also are unprepared, which means they cannot take advantage of the prepared defense that the formation is in. And they happen to be in open terrain, so only a 2 for the defender. So the 7 minus 2 is a +5, which is actually a pretty decent attack, and it should guarantee at least a situational result for the Germans. Let's see what they roll. They don't roll very well. The 5 + 5 is a 10, and that's it's kind of a situational loss for the Germans. If the defenders had been in a prepared defense, they would have suffered 1 step loss. As it is, they suffer no losses. It is a situational retreat on the part of the defender and traffic. And traffic's probably going to be the most annoying bit of this entire attack. So not a very successful attack on the part of the Germans, but it does clear them out of the way. With a situational retreat, they're going to retreat 3 hexes, and I think 1, 2, this is probably as good a place as any for them right now. Brenner will enter the hex, and we will therefore mark the hex as traffic, and that's going to kind of clog up the exit from the woods here, which is really going to limit what the German armor units will be able to do. And with that in mind, that means they'll probably just turn their attention to these poor bastards that they can actually reach this activation. So the important thing, though, for the Germans are that they have, in fact, cleared a path all the way up to the villages. The Brenner is stopped with traffic, but he's not finished necessarily. Actually, let me double check that. I just want to clarify. I'm 99% sure that a shock attack does not finish a unit. It just consumes a fire event. Let me look that up, because I don't want to get this this wrong at this point, and then we'll continue in a moment. And yes, having looked that up, shock attacks do not finish a unit. They may continue moving. They may continue making additional shock attacks up until they have expended their final fire event, at which point they become stopped. So we have the Recon unit here stopped in the hex with traffic, which is going to cause any other unit that enters the hex to also be stopped. Which means I think what we're going to do next is bring up these Jagdpanzers. They're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where they will be stopped. However, they do have 2 fire events, and they're going to use those fire events to bombard the defending engineers with an attack by fire. So I'll just roll both of those now. It's prepared defense and terrain, so it's a 5 or 6 in order to score a hit. And the 1 and 3 failed to do any damage. But now we are going to have the stopped Recon unit now make an attack, a regular combat attack, on the engineers here in the village, and they're going to be assisted by the Jagdpanzers, and we're going to expend 1 artillery point for a suppression barrage. So we're looking at an action rating 5, duel is 6. They do not have the double objective zone, but they're going to get 7, 8 for the artillery and 9 for being assisted. The defenders have a 2. They have no support. They are in prepared defense for 3, and they are in terrain for a 4. So it is a 9 minus 4 gives us a +5 on the combat table, which means the Germans are going to need to roll a 6 or better on the dice in order to take the twin villages with this attack. And they fail. They fail miserably. So a 4 plus 5 is a 9. That's going to be a situational attacker loss. In this case, because the engineers are in a prepared defense, they will lose 1 step, and as a situational retreat and traffic. The traffic's going to be ignored because the attackers don't occupy the hex. The engineers will ignore the retreat and suffer a step loss. So I will go ahead and mark off a step loss to Kampf Group Brenner and a step loss to the 324th Engineers, who are valiantly holding the twin villages against the German attack. And then we'll continue just in just a moment. All right, I do not want to underestimate how important that result was. Had the Germans been able to successfully attack and capture the hex here, they would have jumped the 99th Infantry Division's headquarters. That would have forced the headquarters to displace. But more importantly, it would have dropped the prepared defense for the entire division, which means subsequent attacks on any of its units would be that much easier because the defenders would not get that +1 for prepared defense, and also a mere situational retreat would displace them from their location. So with that said, I think the Germans now, they're going to kind of have to take a closer look at what they want to do. They are still going to be able to kind of put some pressure on the Americans and potentially do some damage. We're going to have, let's see, do we want, yeah, we're going to, I'm going to bring the half-track Panzer Grenadiers up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That will place them there. And then we'll have the other Panzer Battalion go 1, 2, 3. The Panzer Battalion is going to use both of its fire events on 2nd Battalion of the 395th. Again, prepared defense and terrain, so it's a 5 or 6 to get any hits. And a 5 and a 6 will be 2 hits to the 2nd Battalion. That's going to leave them with only 3 steps remaining, so they're down to half strength now. And we're going to follow that up with an attack by the Panzer Grenadiers here. Although that's, yeah, that'll be all right. So we have an attack here. We're going to spend an artillery point for a suppression barrage. We've got an action rating of 4. They have red support for 5. They are in a double objective zone is 6. 7, 8 for the artillery, and assisted by the panzers makes it a 9. The defenders have an action rating of 3. They have no support, but they are in prepared defense for 4, and they are in terrain for 5. So a 9 minus 5 is a +4 on the combat table. And the roll is an 8, which becomes a 12. It's going to be a defender, 1 step loss, and an automatic retreat. So a successful attack here by the Panzer Grenadiers. That's going to be yet another step loss to 2nd of the 395th, and an automatic retreat. They are 1, 2. They are just within 3 hexes of the HQ refuge, and we'll put them back here on the far side of the headquarters there in a little bit of terrain. And now the Panzer Grenadiers have gone off the beaten track into the woods. But that actually was kind of an important attack. As we'll see, we're going to continue to bring up the rest of the infantry in the division now. 1, 2, 3. I'll push through here to 4. We do have at least one more attack to make. We might make 2 more. 1, 2, 3 and a half. 1, 2, 3. All right. These guys will go 1, 2, 3, 4. And 2nd Battalion of the 25th will make an attack against 1st of the 393rd. They're going to be assisted by the Panzer Battalion they're stacked with, and the division will spend another artillery point as a suppression barrage. So here we have only an action rating of 3. Red support is 4. Double objective zone is 5. 6, 7 for the artillery. 8 for the assist. And the Americans have an action rating 3, +1 for prepared defense, and another +1 for terrain is a 5. So an 8 minus 5. This is only a +3, which is going to require an 8 or better on the dice to be successful. And instead, they get a total of 8. That is going to be an A1 and a D situational with traffic. So 2nd Battalion, 25th, and 1st of the 393rd are going to just essentially exchange and each lose a step. I'll go ahead and mark that off, and then we'll finish up with the balance of the activation. Okay, almost finished with the activation here. Just a couple of more battalions to move up, and we're going to, yeah, we'll go 1, 2.5 here, and this last guy will go 1, 2, 3. Now we do need to move up the headquarters, and I think we will move them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is going to cause the trains to be outside of optimal distance. So since they're going to ghost, we might as well move them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll redeploy the trains forward here, which will also shorten that logistical tail a bit. And I think that that's going to do it for this activation. Some disappointing attacks. They had a couple of bad attacks here, and this one didn't have real good odds anyway, so we weren't completely surprised by that. But they did manage to punch a hole in the defenses and at least drive up to the heart of the 99th position. Now the question becomes, are they going to get an opportunity for a second activation? And if they do, now they'll be in a position to really sort of run amok. So let's go ahead and clean up this first activation, getting rid of the traffic and stopped markers, and we're done with the artillery. There's no isolation effects for 12th SS, and so we come to the fatigue roll. They made several attacks, so a 3 or less, and they will lose their fresh status. And as expected, they're going to lose their fresh status because everyone is losing their fresh status in this game, which means they're going to need a 4, 5, or 6 to get that second activation here now. And a 2 is not going to cut it, even if they were fresh. So the Americans dodge a major bullet there by the 12th SS having a kind of a so-so activation on the 17th, which is not to say that the Americans are in a great situation, because they most certainly are not. And there's nothing preventing the Germans from winning initiative on the 18th and deciding to activate 12th SS right off the bat, which would be equivalent to giving them a second activation essentially in this turn. So a major wedge being driven into the 99th position. You can see they're threatening to basically cut this entire position into 2 pockets almost here. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this develops and comes out on the 18th. The Americans are going to be getting stronger every day. They're going to lose that -2 snafu modifier starting tomorrow, although it's still going to be a -1. Every little bit helps for them. So definitely a new crisis here for the Americans to try to worry about. And with that, I think we have only one more American formation left, so we're going to go ahead and switch it back to them and let them attempt to activate Combat Command B. That's going to bring us to the last American formation to activate on the 17th of December, and that is Combat Command B of the 9th Armored. If you recall, they are stacked here. The headquarters is here, marked coordination, stacked with the 106th Infantry Division that was overrun when 116th Panzer Division captured Saint-Vit earlier. The combat command itself consists of only a single tank battalion and a single armored infantry battalion, which are located right here just to the northeast and east of Saint-Vit. We're going to try and activate the formation and see if they can do anything. If they can get at least a partial, and that's likely the best case they can hope for, they can come up and potentially counterattack to try to retake Saint-Vit, which would be of some help for the Americans. But first, they've got to get past that snafu roll. Now, before we even get to the snafu roll, we have to check and see if the trains are on the map, which they are. The trains are located down here. However, The MSR is not complete because, as we were talking about before, tracing from the headquarters, they cannot trace on any of these roads and reach the trains. The Germans have managed to cut them off. So because the MSR is not complete, the trains will come off the map, and again, we'll just place them on the formation card here for now. And we have to decide if we want to create a prepared defense. You can see they're not in prepared defense. They do have a fatigue level of 1, and they have 1 artillery point assigned in addition to the 1 organic point that they have. Because they are not marked with an MSR blocked marker yet, they could create a prepared defense, but we don't want that to happen, because if we get the opportunity to activate, if we can pass the snafu check, we are going to be relocating the headquarters to a point where we can reestablish the MSR, hopefully. And we're also either going to be counterattacking to recapture Saint-Vite or trying to pull these units out of the encirclement to help set up some sort of a defensive line further to the west. So that is going to bring us to the snafu roll. Now, you can see we have -1 for the fatigue level. They are marked coordination, so that's going to be an additional -1 for -2. They are not mixed. They do have an additional -2 for the game specific, so we're at -4 right now. And we're going to skip all the way down to the MSR is not complete section, and we are going to apply the combat trains off map modifier, which is a further -3. So they have a -7 snafu modifier. That's going to require a 10 or better to get a partial result, and there is no chance of a full result. And not unexpectedly, the 6 -7 is a -1. That is a failure. Now they will get rid of the coordination marker, and that brings us to the question of a failure flip, or do we try to get a second activation by rolling a 4 or better? One of the things to consider about trying for a second activation is if we do get a second activation, they will then receive an MSR blocked marker, which is going to add another -1 to the snafu roll, and it's going to, I think it's going to inflict an isolation loss. Let me just double check that here in a moment if we decide to go that route. Otherwise, I think we might be able to convert this to a failure flip and maybe reduce the fatigue level. And I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We will have to inflict an isolation step loss on the 27th Armored Infantry Battalion because it is outside of the command radius, but it does have a safe path, so it would be just a single step loss. You know what? Before we make that decision, I'm just going to verify that you can do a recovery activation with an incomplete MSR. If you can't, then that will answer one of the questions right there. So back in a flash. All right, having checked the rules, in order to do a recovery activation, you must have a complete MSR, which rules out the possibility of making this a failure flip into a recovery activation. So now, the next question is, do we want to attempt to get a second activation? Now, in the isolation step of our first activation, we are going to inflict a single step loss on the 27th Armored Infantry Battalion. If we succeed in rolling a 4, 5, or 6 to get a second activation, we still are going to be looking at a -7. It's actually going to be a -8 because the formation will have suffered an MSR blocked marker. We'd have a -8, which require an 11 to actually get a partial. Then, if we still had a unit outside of the command radius, the MSR blocked marker would actually increase the number of step losses by 1. So worst case scenario, we do get the second activation. We then roll another failure. In the isolation step of the second activation, because the 27th Armored Infantry Battalion would still be outside of the command radius of the headquarters, it would suffer 2 step losses rather than just the 1, which means in this turn it would lose 3 of its steps for basically no gain, no movement, nothing done. With that in mind, I think we are going to forego a second activation attempt for Combat Command B of the 9th Armored, and we're going to hope that prior to activating these guys on the 18th, 7th Armored Division out here to the west will be able to somehow cut open an escape route for them and allow them to reestablish an MSR and get these guys moving. So that's going to do it for the Americans here on the 17th. I'm going to go ahead and record the 1 step loss for the 27th Armored Infantry, and we will pick back up with the remainder of the German formations, which are pretty much all in the south in 7th Army sector. We swing now from the northern half of the battlefield, where both sides have exhausted all of their formations to activate this turn, over to the southern end at the opposite side of the map, where the Germans still have 5 formations yet to activate. They have the 22nd Volksgrenadier and Panzer Lehr here, and then 3 infantry divisions of 7th Army, 352nd, 276th, and 212th. Let's pick up with the action now on the southern half of the battlefield. We begin in the southern half of the battle with the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, which is one of the best of the German infantry divisions in the battle. Their headquarters is located here, just southeast of Dassburg, east of the Our River. They were lined up essentially behind 2nd Panzer Division, which has moved across the Dassburg a little earlier in the day. The rest of the division is located right in here, and they will be pursuing the American 110th Infantry units westward as they attempt to reach Bastogne. I don't think they're going to be able to get there today. It's a little bit too far for them, and the terrain in between them and Bastogne is pretty rough. So we'll see just how far they can get. Right now, their trains are on the map here. They are at optimal distance, and we have a complete MSR. We're not going to put the 26th Volksgrenadier into a prepared defense, so we're going to go ahead and roll the snafu roll. You can see the division does have a fatigue level of 1, so that's going to be -1. They're not marked with a coordination marker, neither are they mixed. They're going to get +1 for the game-specific DRM, which brings it back to 0. The trains are at optimal distance for +1, but they are ghosted, which brings it back to 0. And there is no crossing of the streams nor using tracks. So just a straight up roll for 26 Volksgrenadier. The roll is a good one. It's a 10. That's going to give them a full activation, 2 objective markers, and their artillery, they have 3 organic and 2 assigned. So that's going to be a total of 5 artillery points for this activation. I'm going to take a look here and see where exactly we want to place the objective markers, and then we will pick up with the activation itself. We've decided to place both of our objective markers here where the 110th Infantry headquarters is located. That will allow the objective zone to cover both Love Company here as well as the engineers in Wiltz to the south, and give us a fairly decent area to make any necessary attacks in. Now that that is done, I think we are going to start off by moving the Voraus unit, Kampfgruppe Kunkel, up from the rear here. They're going to cross the bridge for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, 8.5, 9.5, 10.5, 11.5, 12.5, 13.5. That's going to put them in a AVZOC. Actually, it's not, because the unit is unsupported or unprepared, which means it cannot take advantage of the support that 110th Infantry Regiment has. However, that they do not have enough movement points to continue beyond that hex. We'll now move up. However, they will go ahead and use both of their fire events with an attack by fire on Love Company to attempt to attrit them a little bit. Love Company is in terrain, which is going to require a 5 or 6 for a hit. And a 1 and a 3 result in a miss. And so they are stopped for the moment, having expended their fire events. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll bring up first the 77th, and we will have Kampfgruppe Kunkel make an attack against Love Company here, supported by, or rather assisted by 1st of the 77th, and we will expend 1 artillery point for a suppression barrage. The attack is going to be action rating 5. Dual unit is 6, 7, 8 for the artillery, 9 for double objective zone, and 10 for the assist. Defending, they have an action rating of 3. They do not get any support because they're unprepared. They're not in prepared defense. They do have terrain in the hex, and they also have hex side terrain with this stream hex side that Kunkel is attacking across. So that's going to give them a total of 5. 10 minus 5 is a plus 5 on the combat table. It's not a very good roll, but I think it's good enough. 6 plus 5 becomes an 11. That's going to be a defender step loss and an automatic retreat. And for the automatic retreat, again, it's to the HQ refuge, which is the headquarters hex here and all the hexes adjacent. They can, in fact, go 1, 2, 3 hexes to the refuge. So they will go there, and Kunkel will occupy the hex. And Love Company has, well, they've made it back to the headquarters, and they've managed to only lose a single step out of the 3 steps in the formation. So not that bad considering where they started and what they had to do to get back to this point. Now, continuing on with the rest of the activation. It's going to be a lot of movement here. You know what, I think I will go ahead and record the step loss here for the Americans, and I will probably also just go ahead and move the Germans here. We'll come back and I'll show you how things wrap up at the end of the activation. If there is anything that looks like it will be a combat or an attack of any kind, we'll go ahead and show you that as well. But let me go ahead and take care of that, and then we'll catch up here at the towards the end of the activation. As expected, there was no further combat in the activation. The rest of the infantry battalions proceeded to move west here. I have opted not to flip them over to their move side, except for just a couple of the stragglers that were off to the east there. And for instance, the Ersatz battalion, because that puts them on their unprepared side. And I did not want to have some most of the division out here in an unprepared status heading into next turn. While there's nothing apparently between them and Bastogne, that may not necessarily be the case come dawn of the 18th, and I'd rather not leave them out there in such an exposed position, even though it would have enabled us to advance a little bit further. We do have to keep in mind, though, that we could only go 10 hexes west of where the headquarters was going to be, and the headquarters, having crossed the bridge at Dasburg and come down Skyline Drive here to Hosingen before proceeding west on the track, has moved as far as he can. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. We maybe would have gotten out in this vicinity had we flipped to our move side, but I'd rather play it a little bit more conservatively here and hopefully maybe get a second activation. They do have a 50-50 shot of that. The trains have also displaced over to the west side of the Our here at Hosingen. The headquarters is tracing back along the track here, and then the combat trains will go up Skyline Drive, across the bridge at Dasburg, and back off to the supply source on the edge of the map there. With everything moved, it's basically on to the cleanup. We'll get rid of the objective markers and the stopped marker. There are no isolation effects to implement for 26 Volksgrenadier, which brings us to the fatigue roll. They did make one attack, 3 or less, to increase their fatigue level. And that is a 3, which will, in fact, unfortunately for the Germans, increase their fatigue up to a fatigue level of 2, which is not quite what they wanted to see this early in the campaign. Matter of fact, I don't know if I think they failed every single fatigue roll so far. Anyway, that does bring us to the second activation check, and we are going to try to press forward with that. So we will need a 4, 5, or 6. They do get the 6, which will give them a second activation. Again, the trains are on map. We have a complete MSR, and we are not going into a prepared defense. So our snafu roll is going to look a little bit different from last time. We now have a -2 for the fatigue level, no coordination or mixed, +1 for the game specific brings us to -1. They're at optimal distance, which brings us up to a 0, but they are using tracks, so that's going to bring it down to a -1 to the snafu. And that's okay. The 8 becomes a 7, which is still a full activation, which again will give them 5 artillery points as well as 2 objective markers, and more importantly, their full movement. And now we really do need to think about what we want to do in terms of where we're placing these objective markers. There might be a possibility, and I say might because it's going to ultimately depend on how far west we can get this headquarters, and then 10 hexes beyond that, because all of our units do need to end their movement in the command radius of the division. So if we can get 26 Volksgrenadier far enough to the west here to where Bastogne falls within the 10 hex command radius, there might be an opportunity for Kampfgruppe Kunkel to get into Bastogne today. That's going to take a little while for me to sort of look at. So I'm going to cut this here, take a look at that, also decide where we're going to place our 2 objective markers. And once that's been decided and we have a bit of a plan of action for the 26 Volksgrenadier, we'll pick back up from there. All right, one major correction. I just stated that the 8 that the 26 Volksgrenadier rolled for their second snafu roll had only a -1 modifier. As you saw in the breakdown of the modifiers, it was actually a -2. So that 8 is going to become a 6, which just misses the full result and ends up with a partial. And it's a bit of a shame because if they had gotten a full, the headquarters would have been able to reach Oberwampach here, which is just enough to put Bastogne within its 10 hex command radius, and Kunkel would have been able to lunge forward and take a stab at capturing Bastogne with only the 35th Engineer Battalion currently garrisoning the city. So a bit of a loss for the Germans there. Instead, the partial is going to give them only 2 artillery points and a single objective marker, which we're going to place here on Love Company, again, because it will incorporate both Love Company and Wild here, where we may decide to make an attack and seize the city, which is an American victory point hex. You can also see there is a potential bridge demolition here, which we'll need to check for if any of the German units enter the hex here. And just as importantly, the movement is all halved, which is going to limit just how far the division is going to push forward on the remainder of the day today. So we'll get started then with the lead battalion here is just going to go 1, 2, and it will jump the 110th HQ here. That's going to coordinate them. The trains, as you can see, are already ghosted here, and they were not in a prepared defense, so that it's not going to impact that at all. Now the Americans do have to decide where they are going to retreat the headquarters to. And they do have, again, they've got 1, 2, 3 units still fairly widely spread. They need to retreat at least 3 hexes, and it has to be a legal hex. So knowing that the 26th is not going to be able to advance too far in this activation, they don't have to retreat terribly far to achieve some measure of safety, at least for the rest of today. I think we will maybe withdraw them just across the river here, south of Wiltz, just behind the trains here. Obviously, the trains are not in a very good situation. I'm going to double check and see. I think I might be able to move both the trains and the headquarters when the headquarters gets jumped. If that's the case, we will redeploy these trains to put them in a better situation than currently. So let me stop it here, double check that, and then we'll proceed. And as I suspected, no, it does not. When you jump the HQ, it's going to retreat just the HQ. Same thing with the trains. If you jump the trains, it will retreat just the trains. So 1/10 is going to have a bit of an issue here until they get their MSR worked out. Of course, they also have an entire infantry division bearing down on them, so they've got some other pressing matters as well. Now continuing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kunkel will again take 2 of his fire events and conduct an attack by fire with each of them against the U.S. infantry company there, needing a 5 or 6 because they are in terrain. And in this case, they do score 1 hit. That will be a 2nd step loss for Love Company, leaving them with a single step remaining. And now Kunkel will follow that up with an attack. The division will spend 1 of its 2 artillery points in suppression. That's going to be an action rating of 5, +1 for a dual unit. No double objective zone. It's going to be 7-8 for the artillery and 9 for the assist by the 2nd of the 39th. The defenders will have a 3, no support, no prepared defense, and +1 for terrain is a 4. So a 9 - 4 is a +5 on the combat table. A roll of 7 becomes a 12. That is a defender 1 step loss and automatic retreat. That 1 step loss will be the last step of Love Company, so they almost managed to get away, but not quite. And they are non-rebuildable, so they are gone for the duration of the battle. Now, moving on. Let's see, we'll bring, who's under there? We're going to flip this ersatz battalion over. We're going to bring them up 1, 2, and now we're going to roll for the bridge here at Wiltz. We are not going to expend our last Greif team on this, so just a straight roll. On a 1 or a 2, the bridge is okay. On a 3, the bridge is blown. So that might be, I think, our first blown bridge. Let's see how that's going to impact everything else. That is a bit inconvenient for the Germans, particularly, well, not necessarily. I was going to say particularly for the 26 Volksgrenadier as far as MSRs go, not being able to trace maybe down this way rather than sending everything through or over the N12 further north here. But really, this secondary road doesn't really lead anywhere. Eventually it gets down to Edelbrook, way in the south. It's really probably too vulnerable to be considered a decent potential path for an MSR. But in any event, the bridge is blown there. That won't prevent us from still from attacking across. So 1, 2. Now, the 2nd of the 77th will go ahead and conduct an attack across the Wilts River or stream into the city. We will expend our last artillery point for a suppression barrage. It's going to be an action rating 4, no red support, and it's not dual. There's no double objective zone, so it's 5-6 for the artillery and becomes a 7 for the assist by the ersatz battalion. The defenders are going to have an action rating of 2. They are in a city, red city, which makes it 4, and they do have hexside terrain from the stream, which is a 5. So I believe that was a 7-5. It's a +2, so not a very good odds attack on the engineers there, who do have 3 steps. And a 6 becomes an 8. That's going to be an A1 loss and a situational retreat with traffic. Obviously, there'll be no traffic since the attackers will not enter the hex. The situational retreat can be ignored because Wilts is a red city, which is defensible terrain. So that will convert to a 1-step loss on the 44th Engineer, and we end up with a little exchange here. I'll go ahead and record those, and then I'll probably end up doing the rest of the non-combat movement of the formation, and I'll show you what it looks like once 26 Volksgrenadier has wrapped everything up. At the end of the second activation, you can see the division has moved forward, not terribly far. We have moved the headquarters up. We did put 1 battalion into its move side, the 2nd of the 78th, and brought them forward up to the leading battalion here. And we did send the 1st Battalion of the 39th south across the Wilts River with the idea that tomorrow the battalion will move up and attack the remaining engineers in the city here without having to attack across the river, hopefully having more success than the 2nd of the 77th had today. Since the trains did not move and they are in optimal distance at about 10 hexes here along the MSR, we did get them flipped out of their ghost mode. That's going to improve 26 Volksgrenadiers snafu modifier for tomorrow. So other than that, we'll go ahead and clean up the activation. Again, we have no isolation effects we have to worry about, as everyone is within the command radius and has a safe path. So we are up to fatigue. 2 attacks were made, so a 3 or less. And once again, 26 Volksgrenadier fails the fatigue roll, and it increases to a fatigue level of 3. They have gone from fresh to fatigue level 3 here in 4 activations across the first 2 days of the campaign, and that's not good because this increase in fatigue is going to offset the benefit of getting the trains out of ghost mode. So 26 Volksgrenadier may need to take a day off here shortly, right at the time when they probably can't afford to take that day off. So we'll see what impact the increasing fatigue on 26 Volksgrenadier has over the next couple of days, whether they're going to be able to gut it out and push hard to Bastogne. Once they reach Bastogne, they can go ahead and then catch up on some rest. So with that done, we're now going to shift back. You know what? We may go ahead and just activate Panzer Lehr next, and then we'll save the 3 7th Army infantry divisions for last. Now, Panzer Lehr has yet to activate this game, as they start the 16th in a done condition. So this will be their first activation. You can see they're the only remaining fresh formation, at least on the southern half. I think Piper or 1st SS might still be fresh. There may be 1 or 2 fresh formations on the northern half of the German attack, but they're the only fresh formation, at least in the southern half here. What we're thinking of doing with Lehr, and I don't even think it's the entire division that's actually on map yet, is they only have 1 of the normally 2 panzer battalions on map. As we just saw, the 26th Volksgrenadier, here is the 26th Volksgrenadier trains, and this is the track that they marched off to the west. The terrain around 26 Volksgrenadier is not very good, certainly not very good for an armored or a Panzer division. We have the 2nd Panzer here at Clairvaux, but not much beyond Clairvaux. They did get roughed up a little bit by a very successful series of counterattacks by CCR of the 9th Armored. And I think what we're going to do with Lehr is we're going to bring them up and across the Our River. And I think we're going to turn them north up Skyline Drive. We're going to send them way up north here, either to attack CCR or to lend some assistance to 116th Panzer that's being counterattacked by 7th Armored Division. So once we get to the area up here, we'll take a look at the situation, and we will provide some assistance to 116th Panzer, and I think we are going to head out here to the west, probably towards the vicinity of Houffalize, and we will parallel 2nd Panzer Division, hopefully on their right or northern flank as we drive westwards. So with the headquarters activated, the trains are located in this hex here on map. We have a complete MSR, no prepared defense for Lehr, which brings us to the snafu modifiers. They are fresh, which is going to give them a +1. They are not coordinated or mixed. Game specific makes it a +2. Optimal distance is +3. No ghost trains, no crossing the streams, and no tracks. So a +3 to the snafu roll. A 6 is good enough to become a 9. That's going to be a full activation. And now the question is, do we place any objective markers? The division, being motorized, is capable of traveling quite a distance. However, at this point in time, it's got a long way to go to get to any Americans they could attack. You see the closest one, I think, is this 2nd Battalion from the 112th, way up here. So what I'll do is I'll take a look at the movement capabilities of Lehr and see if we can reach 2nd Battalion way up here. We will probably go ahead and place our objective markers up there, but let me go ahead and count that out, and then we'll pick up and see what we want to do with Lehr this activation. Looking at the possibilities, it does look like Panzer Lehr is going to be able to reach some American units up here to the north around the Weiss-Wampach area. So we've gone ahead and placed both objective markers on the infantry battalion that is just west of Weiss-Wampach. And the division is going to essentially kind of come across the road here. They're going to turn right, come up this road, cross the Our River here at Dassburg, out to Skyline Drive, and then head north. I'm going to go ahead and give you a little better look at the interesting part of the activation, which will be up here at the northern end, but I did want to show you how the division was going to get up to that point. So let's take a look and see what happens once Panzer Lehr gets on the move. Panzer Lehr is going to have 2 of their Panzer Grenadier battalions lead the way. As they come up Skyline Drive here, they're going to encounter the 2nd Battalion of the 112th Infantry Regiment here. We're going to stop and make an attack. And again, we were able to we could have just ignored them and driven right past them because they are on their move side and are unprepared. That means they're not exerting any zone of control. However, we don't want to just leave these guys adjacent to the road here, so we're going to go ahead and make an attack and see if we can't either chase them off or inflict some damage on them. The division has 4 artillery points total for the activation, and we're going to have the attack. We're going to have 1st of the 902nd make the attack, assisted by 2nd of the 901st. We're going to spend 1 point for a suppression barrage, and you know what? Let's make that the 2nd of the 901st is going to make the attack, assisted by 1st of the 902nd. We're going to do that just because we've got a 3 action rating as opposed to a 2. So the 1st and the 902nd will be assisting. That's going to give us, for the attack, an action rating of 3, They have red support, which is 4, double objective zone 5, 6, 7 for the artillery, 8 for the assist. The Americans have an action rating of 3. And they are unprepared, which means no support and no prepared defense, and they are in the open. So it is an 8 to 3. That's going to be a +5 on the combat table. Germans roll an 8, making it a 13, which is a D2 and an automatic retreat. Now for the 2nd Battalion, they only had 2 steps remaining, so that actually is going to eliminate the battalion. We'll put them in the dead pile, and then we'll have Lehr, 2nd and the 901st, occupy the hex. That's the first of the attacks, and now we will continue to move up the rest of the formation, and we'll show you what that looks like once everybody gets redeployed in this area here. Now that Lehr has moved up, you can see they've established their headquarters here at the intersection of Skyline Drive and the N12 heading out towards Bastogne. They were able to push a motorized Panzer Grenadier Battalion out to the northwest here towards 7th Armored Division, and they've brought up the rest of the division here. They've redeployed their combat trains forward to remain within optimal distance. But the rest of the American forces nearby, both CCR and 7th Armored Division, were just out of reach of the rest of the division. So that's going to bring us to the cleanup phase. We'll remove the objective markers and the artillery. And now there's no isolation effects to implement against the division here. So we'll move on to fatigue. They made 1 attack. It'll be a 3 or less. They roll a 6, which maintains their fresh status. And again, that's important because now we're going to get a +1 on our 2nd activation check. So normally it's a 4, 5, or 6. This will be a 3, 4, 5, or 6. And unfortunately, they averaged that 6 out with a 1. So Lehr gets a single activation, but they do at least retain their fresh status for tomorrow. And they are positioned here to either advance to the southwest through CCR of the 9th Armored, or they can continue northwest and strike into the southern flank of 7th Armored Division, relieving a little bit of the pressure on 116th Panzer Division up here to the north. With that, I think the only remaining formations we have to activate are down in the 7th Army sector, and there's also 150th Panzer Brigade, which is kind of behind the lines off to the east. We'll get to them at the very end. So for now, we're going to jump back down to the southern flank of the battle. I don't think it matters very much the order in which we activate each of the 3 remaining divisions in 7th Army. So we'll just start west to east with the 352nd, then we'll move next door to the 276th, and then wrap up with the 212th. So we'll flip over 352nd to activate them. Their trains are on the map. They are just off of the screen here to the north at optimal distance. So they have a complete MSR. They're not going into a prepared defense, which brings us to the snafu roll. And the 352nd, as we can see here, is fatigue level 1. So that's going to give them a -1. They are not coordinated and they are not mixed. The game specific brings it back to even. They have optimal distance to their trains. The trains are not ghosted. We're not crossing any streams, and we're not using tracks. So a +1 to the snafu for 352nd. And they don't need that as they roll a 10, becomes an 11. That is a full activation. And that's going to give them 3 organic artillery points with no artillery assigned, and 2 objective markers. Now you can see here their focus right now is on capturing Bettendorf and trying to eliminate this 3rd Battalion of the 109th. One of the issues that they're dealing with is now that they have it surrounded, the American battalion has no safe path, meaning it will not retreat. If a retreat is inflicted on it via the combat table, instead it will remain in place and take an additional step loss. So at this point, unless the 1st of the 915th decides to vacate its position, they are essentially committed to destroying the 3rd Battalion in place. And the only problem with that is that, generally speaking, even the best combat results from the table will only kill 3 steps. So this is a big unit. I know they've taken at least one isolation step loss at this point, but they probably have more than 3 steps remaining. So the other alternative would be to just try to inflict some step losses via an artillery barrage. They are in terrain and they're in prepared defense, which would be a 50-50 shot. And then follow that up with the combat results table. Hope to maybe get an additional step loss from a good dice roll there. They also have the 89th Armored Cavalry Squadron out here from CCA of the 9th. They have some units that might be able to make an attack here at Eppeldorf. They're going to be limited in how far the battalions can advance due to the relatively short command radius of only 6 hexes from the for the formation. So until the headquarters is able to get across the Our here at least and get down in this area, they aren't going to be able to really press too far down as much as they would like to get down here and maybe cause some issues with the MSR for CCA of the 9th. I don't think that's really in the cards right now, at least until they can take Bettendorf. So, and since they've only got 3 artillery points, I think we're just going to go ahead, and I was considering splitting the objective markers, allowing us to make an attack on both of the American units here. But instead, since the attack in the south isn't going to yield very much at all, we're just going to double up the objective zone here and just focus on Bettendorf for now. We've still got some units moving up, and we can, again, perhaps maneuver to maybe try to put some pressure on the armored cav out here. So with that, let's go ahead and start off with the main event. That's going to be the assault on Bettendorf. We will spend all 3 points as a destruction barrage, and then I think we're going to have, let's check the roster here and see which of our battalions is least beat up, because we have made a few failed attacks so far. We're actually not in that bad a shape. 2nd of the 915th has lost 1 step, as has 2nd of the 916th. So we've got 2 battalions here that have suffered one step loss each. And that being the case, I think we're going to let 2nd of the 915th lead the assault again and have it be assisted by 2nd of the 916th. So let's roll the artillery destruction barrage first, and we'll see how many hits, if any, we get there. We need a 4, 5, or 6. And the first 2 result in 1 hit, and the last shot is a 2, which is a miss. So there's 1 more step. Now for the attack itself, we've got an action rating 3. 352nd does have red support, as you can see. That's going to be 4. Double objective zone is 5. No artillery, but an assist makes it a 6. The defenders have an action rating of 4. The 109th does have support, which makes it a 5. They are in prepared defense, which is 6, and they are in terrain, which is 7. So we're looking actually at a -1. So in order to inflict at least a situational retreat, which would convert to a step loss, we're going to need an 8 or better on the dice. And that's exactly what they got. So 8 becomes a 7. That's an attacker loses 1 step, defender, situational retreat, and traffic. Again, we ignore the traffic because we're not occupying the hex, and the situational retreat will be converted to a step loss. So overall, we managed to inflict 2 more step losses on the 3rd Battalion. while taking one more step loss to 2nd of the 9/15th. I'm going to go ahead and record those, and then the rest of the activation will be just moving up a few of the battalions here, so we'll show you what that looks like once everything's finished up there. As you can see, not much, just a little bit of adjustments here south of the river. The Pioneer Battalion did cross over to the south side here, and we did move the headquarters up to the river's edge. There is a destroyed bridge here which will not be repaired during the course of the battle. Eventually, I think the headquarters will come up the track here and cross at the bridge further upstream. But for now, we're going to leave them on the east bank of the river and not using any of the tracks back to the trains back there. When the 2nd of the 9/14th moved adjacent to Bettendorf here, you can see there is a possible bridge destruction on that hex side. So we'll go ahead and roll for that. And not using a Greif team, a 1 or a 2 means the bridge is okay. In this case, it is okay, and I think the Germans actually would have preferred that bridge maybe to have been destroyed, but that's all right. That may help them initially, but later in the game, that bridge is probably going to be of more use to the Americans. There's not much else for the activation here, so we'll start cleanup. Remove this and this. And we will, there's no isolation effects, so we'll go right to fatigue. They made 1 attack. It's a 3 or less to increase the fatigue level. A 5 means they will remain at fatigue level 1. And now I think we are going to try to get a second activation. The defenders in Bettendorf here are wearing down, and I think one more strong push and we should be able to eliminate them. So in order to get that second activation, we're going to need a 5 or 6. And unfortunately, it comes back as a 3. So that's going to do it for the 352nd Volksgrenadier on 17 December. And we will move along to the neighboring formation here on their left. The 276 is up next. Next up is the 276th Volksgrenadier. We'll flip over the headquarters here to activate it. The trains are on map, and they are well off to the north, just at the optimal distance. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yep, just at the optimal distance. So they have a complete MSR. We're not going to be placing them into a prepared defense, so let's get a snafu roll for them. They, as you can see, they are fatigue 1, so that's going to be -1. They're not marked coordination. They're not mixed. They'll get +1 for the game specific, bringing them back to even, +1 for optimal distance. The trains are not ghosted or crossing the streams, nor using tracks. So a +1 for the snafu roll. And a 4 becomes a 5. It's only a partial. We weren't expecting to get too much out of the division today anyway, and that partial is going to make it even less likely. So we'll place our single objective marker right here on the village of Beaufort. And we have 3 organic artillery points, no assigned. That's going to leave us with a grand total of 1 artillery point for the activation. I think we will, before we get going, I did want to point out that the 2 battalions here on the north bank of the river, these are the 2 battalions that I had inadvertently removed from the map earlier when CCA attacked and when Task Force Luckett attacked. And that is just kind of a ghost of Christmas past sort of thing. New in the second edition, or the version 2.0 of the BCS rules, is the headquarters refuge. Prior to this version, units would measure the 3 hex distance to the headquarters hex itself. If you were less than 3 from the headquarters, off the map you came. However, now they've expanded it to include all of the hexes adjacent to the headquarters, and they're calling that the headquarters refuge. So you can see from here, the 2nd of the 986th was 1, 2, 3 hexes from a legal hex, as well as 1st of the 987th over here. They just retreated basically through the headquarters to the far side of the refuge. So they did remain on map. It hasn't affected anything, and now that 276th Volksgrenadier is activating. I figured I'd point that out, and so you aren't wondering where these battalions came from. And I think we will go ahead and flip him over and bring him back to the south side of the river. And I think we will go ahead and get our attack out of the way here. We have an attack on the 19th Tank Battalion in the hex with the CCA headquarters. The attacking unit will be the, let's see, is it 1st and the 986th? Yeah, we'll use the 1st and the 986th, and he will be assisted by 2nd Battalion of the 987th Grenadier Regiment. We are going to spend our only artillery point as a suppression barrage. So we're looking at an action rating of 2. They lost their support when Task Force Luckett killed the one-step support unit that they had. So there's no support for the formation. There's no double objective zone because of the partial activation, which means they're going to get 3-4 for the artillery suppression, 5 for the assist. On the defender side, the Tank Battalion has an action rating of 3. They are not dual and they're not eligible for support because no AV unit is eligible for support. They are not in a prepared defense, but they are in terrain. So that's going to make that 3 a 4. So we have a 5 minus 4. It's a +1 on the combat table, and they're going to need to roll at least a 6 in order to capture the hex. And they did better than that for sure. They rolled a 10 on the attack. That 10 becomes an 11. That's actually a defender step loss and an automatic retreat. So a little better attack than we had counted on. That's going to force the Tank Battalion to retreat 3 hexes. I'm going to slide the headquarters card out of the way here just a little bit, because they're going to go back locally to the rear. 1, 2, 3. They'll go back to the open hex here, and this will allow 1st of the 986 to enter the hex, which means they're going to end up jumping the headquarters for CCA of the 9th Armored. So now we've got to look at where we want the headquarters to fall back to, and I think given the scarcity of U.S. units here, the headquarters has to go back a minimum of 3 hexes. So they will just go with the Tank Battalion here. That is going to flip their trains into Ghost. They have no prepared defense to lose either, and it will mark them with coordination. So that's going to disrupt the defense a little bit here in this sector. And I don't think we have, that's going to be, yes, see, they're not going to be able to make it across the river there, but we'll slide him up to here, I suppose. And I think that's really all we can do. We could make another attack here, but that's not going to be a very good attack, especially with no artillery. I would go ahead and make the attack if we had an artillery point to spend for some suppression there, but since we don't, it's probably going to be more counterproductive than actually successful if we do. And by advancing here, we've managed to cut off and surround the 60th Armored Infantry Battalion anyway. So I think that's going to do it for now in this activation. I'll go ahead and clean it up. And again, no isolation effects. So straight to fatigue. That one attack is a 3 or less. And they do roll a 3, so their fatigue level is going to increase to a fatigue level of 2. And now we are going to try to get a second activation. It's highly unlikely. As you can see, they need a 6 to get that second activation. But if they do, they have kind of opened things up here. They have an opportunity to kind of come down here and cut CCA off from 4th Infantry Division. Let's see if they get a chance to do that. And they almost do. A 5 just misses. So that's going to be a short but a little more productive than anticipated activation from 276 Volksgrenadier. That leaves us with just one more formation to activate, and that is going to be the 212th Volksgrenadier. All right, 212th Volksgrenadier is activating. We'll flip over the headquarters here. And their trains are to the north at optimal distance, and we have a complete MSR. We are not going to place them into a prepared defense, so it's right on to the snafu roll. They do have a fatigue level of 1, so that's going to be a -1, offset by a +1 for the game-specific DRM, brings it back to even, and their trains are at optimal distance. They are not ghosted, nor crossing the streams or using tracks. So another +1 to the snafu for 212. And that's not going to be quite good enough. That 5 becomes a 6, which is a partial, and that's going to give them 3 artillery points. They have no assigned. That rounds down to a 1. So a single artillery point and one objective marker. And I think they're going to place the objective marker here. And now we need to decide where we are going to attack. Again, this is a similar situation to the 276th, where if we had our full complement of artillery, I'd be willing to make a few attacks here in an effort to wear down the 4th Infantry Division. But without a suppression barrage, the chances of inflicting any kind of loss on the Americans is not very good. So we're going to have to make, we'll limit it to just one attack, and we'll try to make it count. Again, obviously, Echternach is kind of the big prize here. So, but it's also going to be the toughest hex to take because of that city terrain. I think though we'll try, I'm going to do, you know what, let's try and cut them off again. We're going to have 2nd Battalion of the 423rd make an attack here on the 1st Battalion of the 12th, and they're going to be assisted by 1st of the 423rd, and we'll spend our only artillery point in a suppression barrage. That's going to give us an action rating of 3. There is red support, which is good. That's a 4. No double objective zone. 5, 6 for artillery, and 7 for the assist. On the defender's side, they have an action rating of 4. They do have support, which is 5. 4th Infantry Division is also in a prepared defense, making it a 6, and they are in terrain for a 7. So a 7 to 7. This is straight up, no modifiers. And the 6 doesn't quite cut it. They needed a 7 in order to inflict a situational retreat, which would have converted to a step loss. So instead, it's going to be just simply an attacker 1 step loss. So 2nd Battalion of the 423rd will take a loss. And I think we are going to move the headquarters up a little bit. And the Pioneer Battalion will come with the headquarters, but we're going to leave it back here in the rear as it's still rebuilding from being destroyed in the initial attack over here by the American artillery. And other than that, I don't see much else for us to do here. So a disappointing but not entirely unexpectedly so activation for 212. We'll roll for fatigue. That one attack is a 3 or less. And the 6 means they remain at fatigue level 1. Do we want to try for a 2nd activation? Yeah, let's see if we can get a 4, 5, or 6 to get a 2nd activation. We do get the 4, so we will get a 2nd activation. The snafu modifiers remain the same, so it's going to be a net +1 again. And this is a better roll. This gives us a 9 + 1 is 10. So that is a full activation this time. So at least we'll get our 3 artillery points and 2 objective markers, and we're going to place them at the same location here. We're going to start off by repeating that attack by 2nd Battalion of the 423rd. We're going to spend one of our points for suppression, and that's going to change things a little bit here. Instead of being a +0, this time it's going to be an action rating 3, support is 4, double objective zone is 5, 6, 7 from artillery, 8 from the assist, and the defenders have a 4 +1 support, becomes a 6 for the prepared defense, and a 7 for the terrain. So 8 to 7, we're going to pick up that +1. Let's see if that makes any difference. And it did make some difference. That's a 9. I don't know if it made enough though. It's 9 +1 becomes a 10. And that's going to be a conditional attacker loss. Since the defenders are in prepared defense, that does mean that 2nd of the 423rd will suffer 1 step loss, and it's a situational retreat, which is converted to a step loss on the defender. So they did manage to get an exchange out of it this time. So 1 loss to each of the units involved. And then I think we're going to switch gears, or rather sidestep here to Echternach, and we're going to have the 2nd Battalion of the 316th make an attack assisted by the 212th Fusilier Battalion here, and we will also spend 1 artillery point in a suppression. Do we want to do that, or do we want to try to blast them out? Well, since we only have 2 points, yeah, we're going to spend that as a suppression barrage, and hopefully we'll get lucky here. So, action rating is 3. They do not have support because they are on the wrong side of the Americans. The bridge is down over here, or the bridge is up over here, but not yet up on the east side. They get the double objective to make it 4, 5, 6 for artillery, 7 for the assist. The defenders are 4 +1 for support is 5, 6 with the prepared defense, and then 7, 8 for the city terrain. That's an 7 minus 8. It's actually a -1. So again, not looking very good here. And it got real ugly with a 3, becomes a 2. That's an attacker 2-step loss. So 2 step losses to the 2nd Battalion of the 316th. And we have a single artillery point left, which we will drop here on the 3rd Battalion, spotted here by the 1st of the 320th. This is going to be in terrain. They're in prepared defense. So a 4, 5, or 6 to score a hit on the Americans, and that goes much better. So 1 hit to the 3rd of the 12th here from the artillery, and that's going to do it. So we'll clean up here. Again, no isolation effects, and it's a 3 or less for the fatigue, and this time the fatigue does increase to level 2. And then that's going to do it for the 212th. I'll go ahead and mark off the losses from these 2 activations. And then I think that's going to do it for the 17th of December. I'll give you a quick overview of where things stand here, and then we'll pick it up with the 18th of December in our next episode. Now, the one formation that I did not show you their activation on camera is the 150th Panzer Brigade. It's that small motorized unit comprised of, or formation comprised of 3 motorized battalions here. They started the day back here, having arrived as a reinforcement on the 16th and driven up. They got a full activation, and all they did was continue to drive forward towards the front. They've got a couple of their battalions to the west side of the Our as they crossed over here at Dasburg. Right now, the brigade is serving as the 5th Panzer Army's Army Reserve. From here, they have the flexibility to either follow 2nd Panzer straight out to the west. They can swing north if required to come up and assist Lehr and 116th Panzer, or they can even turn due south and come down towards the Ettelbruck and Diekirch area if needed. We did not try to get a second activation with them. They are fresh. We want to keep them fresh, so I didn't see any point in risking a second activation, which would require a fatigue roll of a 1 or a 2 could have removed their fresh. So that's it for 150th Panzer. For the rest of the day here, as we look starting in the south, you can see the German infantry divisions here in 7th Army, particularly 212th, continues to make some fairly unimpressive attacks against 4th Infantry Division, although some of the infantry battalions are starting to get worn down, especially 3rd Battalion here with only a couple of steps left. 276th did manage to make a successful attack and capture the village of Beaufort, where CCA of the 9th Armored's headquarters was. That's going to cause some issues getting CCA going on this next turn on the 18th. Meanwhile, 352nd continues to pound away unsuccessfully at Bettendorf. The 5th Fallschirmjäger has surrounded Diekirch and locked in the 109th. And out further to the west, you see 26th Volksgrenadier had a chance to make a lunge for Bastogne, but just could not get that second full activation they would have required. Early in the day, we saw 2nd Panzer capture Clairvaux. There was a small counterattack here by CCR of the 9th, which are holding their own, although it's not a very big formation, and a couple of the units are not very big themselves. So they are still in quite a bit of danger, particularly with Panzer Lehr having moved up here late in the day and taken a position at the crossroads just northeast of them. Coming around to the northern side of the battlefield, you can see that the pocket here around Saint-Vite is starting to close in and solidify as the Fallschirmjäger move forward. There are still a couple of battalions holding out on the Schnee-Eifel. The rest of 106th and CCB of the 9th are trapped here east of the town. And as we pull back further to the north, you can see 1st Panzer Division, which includes Comfort Piper, leading the charge out here all the way out to Malmedy here on the 17th. And the other half of the 1st SS Panzer Corps, 12th SS, has slammed into the center of the 99th Infantry Division's position here, broken through the front lines, and made an attack at the Twin Villages. However, the Recon unit was repulsed by the American engineers there. The bulk of 2nd Infantry Division is still kind of stuck up here trying to untangle themselves from the attack they were making. It is not going to help matters that the headquarters had been overrun by 1st SS units coming up here. So as the headquarters displaces, they are still trying to get a handle on the situation and get their fighting battalions pulled back and faced in the right direction. It should be a big battle for Elsenborn Ridge here in the next coming days. This will be the key to the battle, I think, because if the Germans can keep the Americans north of Elsenborn here, that will free up this northern route, and it should be enough to get 2nd and 9th SS Panzer Divisions all the way out here to the exit points for the sudden death victory. So the northern sector, which went from being in an okay situation, has gone very quickly from okay to really not so good. 1st Infantry Division and 9th Infantry Division really need to kind of get going here. If they cannot get into this, this may be too much for 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions to handle by themselves. Out to the west here, 7th Armored Division did give a bloody nose to the 116th Panzer Division, but again, the division did take heavy losses. They lost 15 steps worth of AV, and another couple of days like that, and the division won't exist anymore. And they are really the only substantial force that the Americans have right now in front of the 3 or 4 Panzer divisions that are currently engaged. So we'll see how things go on the 18th. The Americans are finally going to be out from underneath that hideous -2 snafu modifier that they were under for the first 2 days. It's not going to be completely gone. It's going to drop to a -1. But as you can see, even a -2 to a -1, every little pip you can get on a snafu roll can make the difference. So That's going to do it here for the 17th of December. We've got 2 days in, coming up on the 3rd day. Appreciate you